And we'd like to say special thanks to Alexandra Jones, who's with us again, having been here only a few weeks ago with the Science Minister, Lord Vallance. So it's a pleasure to have you here. It's a particular pleasure to have our Secretary of State. As I understand, this is your first appearance before a select committee.
It is.
Lord select committees are good ones to choose to appear before first, I think, because we're generally very nice to our witnesses. As I'm sure you will know, this session is being broadcast on Parliament Live TV. A full transcript is being taken, which will be made available to you shortly after the meeting for any minor corrections. And if you're all ready, we'll then kick off. So we'd like you to make a short opening statement. And I think we'd be particularly keen to hear about what your key priorities in the role are, what you're hoping to achieve, and I know you haven't been in post that long, but what you feel you've achieved so far. So, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the committee for having me here. It's a privilege for all of us to be before your committee, and a special privilege for me making this the first parliamentary committee appearance as Secretary of State. I'm very aware that there are people sitting around this table and participating virtually who have a lot more experience in a lot of these areas that we're discussing today than myself. So I approach these sessions with a sense of humility as well. But I think the thing that would unite us all is a sense that Britain has enormous potential when it comes to science and innovation and technology, and that we'd all strive together as a Parliament to explore all of that potential. So let me start by just beginning to explain some of the changes that I've made to the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology since becoming Secretary of State. The science and technology are fundamental to this government's purpose. From growing the economy to fixing our NHS, our national missions are founded in technology, development, diffusion, and of course, deployment. Last week, faced with difficult decisions, the Chancellor decided to increase public R&D spending to a record level of over £20 billion, boosting DSIT's R&D budget by 8.5% in real terms. It is my task to demonstrate to each and every citizen in this country that investment in science and technology can deliver real, meaningful change. If you look around the world today, there are governments which are delivering personalised public services to their citizens, and they're using digital technology in order to deliver that transformation. Unfortunately, UK public services have been left behind, and over the past 14 years, by a combination of inadequate investment and insufficient reform. So, working with the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, one of my first actions was to create the Digital Centre of Government. As a result, DSIT will become experts in data, digital and AI, and the government and from government digital services, GDS, to the digital to the Central Digital and Data Office, and to the incubator for AI. All of these units now will become a part of DSIT and part of our programme of transformation. At the same time, the department is shifting its focus to deliver economic growth. The days when government departments, judged by their relative power and potential, which was judged by the amount of taxpayers' money that it was given, those days are over. Today, the metric moved to driving economic growth so that we can afford the strengthened defences, increase opportunities, and better public services that our nation so desperately needs. That's why I was particularly encouraged by Viscount Stansgate's recent debate on science and the economy. And as part of the industrial strategy, we will champion growth in the science and the tech sectors by supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs in communities across our country. For example, last week we announced £70 million for the new Life Sciences Manufacturing Fund as part of a long-term funding commitment of up to £500 million. As well as backing today's science and tech sectors, the stories we are championing from the industries of tomorrow. At last month's International Investment Summit, over £24 billion was committed to projects directly relating to AI. Much of that was data centres, which will power our digital economy. Data centres which, thanks to our planning reforms, will now be easier to build and deploy in the nation's interests. Our AI action plan will be published shortly. It will describe how the government intends to maximise the extraordinary power of this emerging technology to increase productivity and the competitiveness right across our economy. The digital revolution, if the digital revolution is to succeed, from all of the tangible benefits must be available to all. This is a driving mission for myself and this government. That's why investing in innovation to transform our public services is so crucial. I've spoken before about the benefit that, had my mother been scanned at Huddersfield Hospital, where AI is integrated into the radiography department, I truly believe that she would be alive today, which shows the human aspects of digital technology. Across the country, there are countless similar examples. That's why I strongly believe that the application of innovative technologies in our public services must become the rule, not the exception. Because by detecting disease earlier, the modern NHS technologies will help families share their lives together for longer. By reducing the administrative burden on teachers, modern education technologies will free up teacher time to support those pupils to maximise their talents. And by making it easier for businesses to interact with the government, we can help them with their productivity and also their profitability. I can tell the committee that today we have launched the trial of 15,000 businesses for the new gov.uk chatbot, giving new ways to interact with the government in ways that will drive profitability and efficiency. The Digital Centre of Government is now more than a clunky catchphrase. It is the route to making better public services and more customer focused and more in tune with the public's increasingly digital lives. The average UK citizen, adult, spends a working week and a half dealing with government bureaucracy every single year. That means less time to do the things they like to do and be with the people that they love to be with. By driving the digital revolution throughout government, I believe we can restore the citizens' belief that the state can work effectively and efficiently for them, and that we are worthy of their trust.
Well, we can absolutely hear your passion for digital and AI, and I'm sure the sort of improvements you're talking about are ones we would all be very grateful to see. But what about all the other important areas of science and technology that your department covers? Are they going to get the airtime with you?
Oh, of course, and I'm here to talk about all of the things that you'd like me to talk about. The department covers everything from space to 5G and broadband infrastructure rollout. And then in between, we, of course, have life sciences, university research, and our publicly funded R&D, investing and trying to get the collaborations between the private and public sector research so we add up to more than the sum of our parts. And then when you move across to technologies of the future, such as quantum and AI, and then the social media landscape as well, you get a taste of why I believe that this is the most exciting part of government that if we get it right, and the transformation to the new DCIT, where we have the digital centre of government, we have a powerful science minister, as you saw in his evidence last week, who is driving forward the reforms that we need to make science more aligned with the priorities of our nation, whilst also always protecting the need for scientific discovery. You can see why this department will be a foundational department that crosses all of the 5 missions and partners with government departments to improve the transaction of government itself, but also, I hope, to transform the relationship that citizens have with their public services and their state by introducing digital technology to empower them and ease the interactions that they have.
Baroness Willis is desperate to come in.
Just a really quick question. So I absolutely admire everything you're saying. But with this digital transformation, how are you going to ensure that departments like DEFRA and the vast amounts of environmental data that they have come into this digital transformation? Because I would say that many citizens and many groups that are trying to do nature recovery or trying to do anything just cannot get any access to that sort of data.
It is. You say it's a quick question.
Yes.
Data is never a quick answer in my view, but I'll try my best. We've got to go right back to the fundamentals. I mean, I've inherited a really difficult landscape when it comes to data, not least because we have a number of legacy systems which are in critical state, and their vulnerability is critical. And in order to update them and get them fit for purpose for this day and age actually is going to be costly and time consuming. And of course, if we are trying to get to the data that's going to be truly transformative, some of it is hard to actually get to. So you'll see in our manifesto that we committed to the National Data Library. We could only commit to the project of a National Data Library because we stood on a platform at the election of a decade of national renewal. It enables people like myself putting together a programme of government to undertake projects that are going to take more than one parliamentary term. I believe we've been held back profoundly by the need to get things done, announced, funded and then delivered in a 3 to 4 year period. So the National Data Library will force government over time to make all data interoperable, not just within their own departments, which it isn't the case at the moment, but between departments as well, and then make sure that safety and privacy is always there at the outset so that the public can safely believe that we are then anonymising data, bringing it together centrally and making it accessible for research purposes, both for social sciences, academic science and for medical research as well. Because if we do that, then we will have harnessed one of the greatest assets in the entire world, and that is the data that comes from the way that Britain is governed and its welfare state.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the previous government had the ambition that we should be a science superpower by 2030, and that was supported by the Science and Technology Framework, and there were a series of metrics and a science and technology strategy across government, and there were all sorts of responsibilities for tasks like procurement, skills, regulation, etc. And there was going to be reporting on progress against these metrics. So has all that disappeared, or are you going to be continuing to report against our progress to becoming a science superpower?
No, it's certainly not disappeared. I would argue that we have increased our sense of ambition for science and research in this country simply because we have now put it on a sustainable financial footing. And that was not the case before. I've been quite honest over the summer about some of the challenges that I've inherited. There were programmes which weren't costed, weren't funded. There are some very sizable programmes which were announced verbally by Prime Ministers and Chancellors that had not a single penny of money allocated to it by the Exchequer for my department, which made some very, very difficult decisions when I came in. You'll see in the budget last week that the Chancellor has increased the R&D budget for my department by 8.5%. Overall spending on R&D for government is now over 20 billion, so we are at a record high, including core R&D budget for the department, which of course will protect discovery-based science. So whatever aspect of science you are interested in, you will see an increase in ambition. You will also see an increase in expectations from me about what we deliver for it and how it delivers for the priorities that our country has.
Are you going to be giving us regular progress updates?
You will have regular progress updates.
Excellent. At that point, I shall hand over to
I hope my early appearance before your committee shows a token of goodwill when it comes to transparency.
Let me hand over to Baroness Neuberger.
Well, you've already said something about the budget and core R&D budgets being protected, which is absolutely fantastic. But obviously, the devil's in the detail. We'd love you to come back, so that's great. Has the increase in costs that have been associated with Horizon Europe been shifted onto DCIT's budget or to DCIT's books? And do we know whether the costs are fully funded, in fact, by the increase in DCIT's budget?
The Horizon budget is ring-fenced by Treasury. So I hope that reassures the committee that some of the fears that I've read about over the summer and into the autumn are not realised.
That's great. Thank you. So I'm going to declare an interest because I chair University College London Hospitals, which you know. And so the next bit, which is about the spending review in the spring, and the longer term envelope for departmental budgets actually may affect us, certainly on the research side. So I'd really like to know what ambitions you have for R&D spend in that context of the spending review. And when it comes to the ambition for those R&D budgets for certain institutions, that's why I had to declare the interest, when will we know which organisations will get that funding, and will it be a floor, not a ceiling, as Lord Valence said?
So, yes, there's lots in there. I think you'll all understand as a committee why I'm not going to go into too much detail about the negotiations that haven't even started yet for Spending Review 2. And let me just say that the two incredible officials that I have sitting either side of me, they deserve just a couple of weeks without the spending review in their lives before we embark on the next one. I do want to pay tribute to DSIT. I know that there'll be some officials watching this. I stand in total awe and admiration for the way that they approached the challenges that I put on their lap coming into office, demanding some very, very major reforms of the way that we operate as a department, we're structured as a department and prioritise as a department. We've introduced delivery functions that weren't there before. We've introduced economic functions to our department, interactions with a broad economy that weren't there before. And then we were put straight into the spending review process, which was expedited for the need to wrap it up by the time of the budget. I'm very proud that process went through and what we delivered on behalf of the scientific community, research committee and technology community at the other side. And partly that was done through the earnestness, the sincerity and the real elbow grease that my whole department put into it, and also the nature of the discretion that we showed. There was no leaks from my department over the process of this spending review, and I was even too scared to talk about it after the budget because I've become so used to being careful with my language. The full details of how the allocation will now be sort of worked out, ironed out, and then our stakeholders and all the relevant communities will be informed in due course. And because of everything I've just said, I'm not going to venture into the next spending review, but I do hope that those stakeholders who were quite publicly showing signs of anxiety about, and if I'm very honest, believing every rumour that they read in a newspaper or blog as to what I was aiming for or capable of delivering, I hope people will be a little bit more confident about the nature and the passion with which myself, my officials and my department enter into defending the best interests of science and technology in this country.
Thank you.
Baroness Neville-Jones.
Minister, I'd like to just pursue one or two of these issues with you. One of the major reforms in the budget was the change to the fiscal rules which allow for investment in infrastructure. Now, we've been told that the work ongoing in DSIT into what's called a long-term plan for research and innovation in infrastructure is being prepared. We think that's very good news, if true. One of the things we hear from innumerable people who actually come to give us evidence on what they're doing in their particular field, one of the things they do talk to us about is the absence or the inadequacy of the infrastructure that they're faced with, either not enough of it or not enough of it of the right quality or modernity. And you do get the feeling, that it's holding things back. So, question, when do you think we might expect to see such a plan? And will it, what's going to be its coverage, and will it be flexible?
I hope you will have noticed some of the action that I took over the summer. First, to your previous role in government. On the first day in the office, I was briefed on. I had a classified briefing on the state of cybersecurity for the country, obviously directly related to our digital infrastructure as a nation. I came straight out of that meeting, and then within a couple of days had requested an additional piece of legislation from the leader of the House a cybersecurity bill which will be introduced later into this session. That was because of vulnerabilities that I saw straight away at the beginning of the job. And that now is translating into a cybersecurity bill, which will increase the resilience that we have in our cyber network, and it will also put duties onto providers of all sectors who are investing into our digital network and our cyber network, and give additional powers to myself or the Secretary of State and successive Secretaries of State to act in the national interest when it comes to digital infrastructure. Secondly, I've moved the status of digital infrastructure to that of national critical infrastructure. That again requires investment of a higher level into our digital infrastructure. It means that in terms of the government, we treat it with the same level of seriousness as other utility sectors such as water and electricity. And then going forward, we have the general digital landscape and infrastructure. We do need to increase our general compute power as a country. We need to increase radically our ability to process data via data centres and store data. We need to look afresh at our sovereign capacity. All of the pieces of work to deliver this and understand the needs of our country is currently underway. So we have Matt Clifford, highly respected person in the AI world and in the investment world, currently chair of ARIA, is doing a piece of work for me on the AI action plan. That is going to cover a lot of the areas about national data infrastructure and its resilience. That will be reporting in due course, and on the back of it, I'm already preparing to respond as quickly as I can to some of the recommendations out of it. I accept that we do not have much time if we're going to invest on a scale that's going to keep Britain at the forefront and enable our country to benefit from all of the digital opportunities in the future. If we don't get the data infrastructure right, we won't be able to do so.
Well, that's fantastic news. And you don't have a timetable, or you do have a timetable?
Well, so we're at the very beginning of...
Do you have an aim, at least?
An aim in what regard? So did you want to add something, Alex?
I mean, more to build on. So we're definitely looking at this as part of phase 2 planning. And so thinking about those long-term plans, thinking about the longer-term investments. We've got programmes, as you'll know, like World Class Labs, that looks at actually maintaining labs to a standard. I know there's more to do, but those are some of the recognition that we need to not only build some of the new infrastructure we need and do so in a strategic way, because we'll never have as much money, however much we invest, as the opportunities to invest in infrastructure. So thinking strategically about where do we put that investment, working with the community to do so, and then looking at the maintenance as well. And that's very much part of the phase 2 planning, and we'll build on, as the Secretary of State said, Matt Clifford's plan and a whole range of other work we're doing. So for phase 2, we will need some of those long-term plans around infrastructure.
Well, the committee, I'm sure, will follow that, with enthusiasm. And I'm cheered if, as I understood you saying, that also not just the big stuff, but also some of the rather smaller stuff, which actually is integral and really essential to good research in other areas and sort of laboratory infrastructure in science, also gets a bit of the share of the proceeds, because it's disproportionately damaging, to some of these other activities. Can I just ask you about attitude inside government? I think there's I put it this way, I think that across the benches there's a general acceptance and indeed enthusiasm for the notion that this country should make the most of and should seek to become a prosperous flyer in the world of science and technology. The question that I think bugs a lot of people is when it comes down to hard tax for the Treasury, the short term tends to take over. Can you give us any sort of feel for whether you think the Treasury is more sympathetic to and indeed attaches a higher priority to, and in terms of the national ambition, to the kind of things we're talking about, than has possibly all traditionally been the case?
Just to tie up on your previous question as well about timings, I don't want to give you the impression that I'm sort of dodging setting times and that you can hold me to and my department to account for. It would have been remiss for me to give time scales on delivering things that have not yet been announced in terms of the action plans. And I've commissioned very serious pieces of work on compute and digital infrastructure. I need to understand the exact needs of our country before I then put the pathways towards it. I know that the AI action plan is going to give some quite specific details on the needs of our country going forward. And that is what we'll be striving towards. I'm very happy to come back and discuss more specifics about timings of doing so. I will. In terms of the several areas we've spoken about, the National Data Library. That is a project that's going to take us beyond one Parliament. In our manifesto, we committed to 10-year R&D budgets where appropriate, and of course we're working on the principles that will underlie where that is appropriate at the moment.
The Treasury is with you on that.
Absolutely, and we don't talk about the specifics of negotiations going through, but it won't be a surprise to the committee to know that the areas of each department, the importance of economic growth and unlocking economic growth and the long-term success of our country were what the Treasury was looking for in the discussions that we had with them. And when you ask me about whether there is acknowledgement, I paraphrase, acknowledgement and sort of respect for the areas covered by this, because perhaps past generations may not have done so, I point to the outcome that we delivered. That I'd love to say that that's all because of myself and officials being fantastically good negotiators. It was because the argument that we put forward was not just accepted, but acknowledged by the Treasury about the importance of R&D, technology, the jobs of the future, where they're coming from. If you look at sectors across the economy which are growing faster than the OECD average, we're looking at space, we're looking at R&D, we're looking at R&D-driven businesses. We're looking at the ability to spin out and upscale new innovations into the economy, and we're also looking at digital and data. So the case that the areas covered by this department being critical to the future success and the short, medium and long-term impact on growth, I think is one that I could evidence quite solidly. And in broad principle terms, I don't know of a single business that has been failing or stagnating that has not been turned around by clever use of innovation.
Right.
And the same goes for our country.
Right.
We have to innovate. We have to capture the very best of science and technology in our country, and we have to have the infrastructure on which to fully capitalise on it, and that includes skills.
It's good if you've got that message across to the Treasury as strongly as that. We move on to Lord Drayson.
Secretary Strait, just want to explore further the digital transformation of government that DSIT is now responsible for, and you've already made a number of really interesting positive points. Really, I think our area of interest is around the practicalities of implementation across multiple government departments, when currently approximately half of all government spend on IT is being spent on legacy systems. How are you going to get the other government departments to work together to adopt common practices and systems?
I love how the committee is very good at answering very short questions which actually relate to enormous subjects. I'm very aware of the challenge. In opposition, we did a piece of work doing FOIs to every government department asking about legacy systems so that we could be as prepared as possible for the challenge of legacy. And we are now going through the process of prioritising. There is a series of different issues relating to... we can't do it all at once when it comes to legacy. It is very expensive, but as you say, the fundamental challenge that previous governments have experienced and the pressures that we'll be under is, yes, in terms of revenue funding, it is very expensive and costly in order to maintain and keep secure legacy systems, but the capital investment it would take to upgrade and renew them are extremely high in certain cases. So we're in the process of trying to understand how the nature of the security challenge that is posed by some of them, the cost challenges of maintaining them, and also the cost that it would take to actually upgrade them. And what we're trying to now systematically put together a plan that we can actually, over time, update legacy systems based on the security challenge and the cost implications of doing so.
But could you just expand a little bit on sort of if you look at the machinery of government methodology you're going to use to implement this? Because chief information officers often have enthusiasm for the legacy systems that they were responsible for implementing. So in the end, once you've consulted across the departments, you've got a grip on the landscape, how does DCIT implement standards across government? Is DCIT now the boss, effectively, of government IT?
Okay, so I'm going to give the high-level answer to this, and then I can feel Emran is poised to leap in after me and fill in any gaps that I might leave. So Emily Middleton is delivering a review of the digital centre to create the structural response to the challenges that we are posing, that we want to tackle as a government using the new DCIT. It's also going in tandem to Matt Clifford's AI action plan, which will need the structure and capacity within government to deliver it. As you quite correctly say, this can't be done by DCIT to every other government department. It has to be done in partnership with every government department. That means for the first time ever, we need to understand the digital capacity that each government department has. So in the first week of coming into office, I commissioned a State of the Digital State review, and that is going across all government departments to understand the digital capacity of each government department, the digital skills within each government department, and the ability to actually design, develop and implement digital programs within each department. This is not in order to expose problems or point fingers. This is simply because I am trying to create in DCIT a digital centre with the resource capacity that is simply incapable of being replicated or designed in each department themselves, but therefore centrally we can have a capacity that others don't, and we need to be complementary, not replace. So I need to know where the talent is that we need to harness and work with, and where there are gaps that we can quite easily fulfil in order to deliver the programs that we're talking about. In terms of the governance, it's again a very good question. What has happened is delivery of digital services has moved from across government, mostly Cabinet Office and Number 10 to DCIT, but I never wanted governance to move all the way to DCIT. So we now have the interministerial group where we have the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, we have the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and myself on this committee, and that has oversight of all of the areas that we're talking about here when it comes to digital transformation across government. The first thing we did in our very first meeting was put a moratorium on any spend on digital and IT programs of over 5 million that would then need to come into the interministerial group for scrutiny and sign-off before being implemented. And over time, because we need to get this right, I can't do everything in 3.5 months, there will be frameworks and there will be standards, and then of course there's going to be a knock-on on procurement. And from the interministerial group, you will start to see cross-government standards frameworks being set, for which we can then start to have a grip, and then the department will start for supplying delivery functions. I think we'll probably be talking a bit more about that going forward. Emran, did you want to supplement any of that?
No, it was exactly that. I think in terms of the machinery of government, I think it's the State of Digital Government review I think is really significant because it gives us the diagnosis and it allows us to identify the capabilities that we bring to bear, and then governing the plan that follows from the review via the interministerial group. I think recognising that we need the centre of government with us, which is then represented on that group by the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and also the Treasury and the focus that they bring on delivering value for money for spend, and the Chief Secretary of the Treasury being represented on the interministerial group to bring that perspective as well. Right. I think that gives us a really powerful way to move on from the review.
Right. Now, you'll be aware that we've had evidence that the government struggles to recruit the level of expertise in IT software engineering. And with this welcome championing that's now taking place in DSIT, how are you going to address that problem?
I think there's two aspects of this. Clearly, there are people who are extremely highly skilled. If we're talking about AI, for example, the global talent when it comes to leading AI programs and being able to program for the digital capacity that's to the standard that's needed is actually very small. So in those circumstances, we are going to have to pay and remunerate in a way that reflects the levels of skill that some individuals will have. Yep. I accept that, and I'm willing to do so. There's a second bit as well, which isn't talked about very often, and that's there are enormous people out there, domestically, in America, in California, and around the world, who do care deeply about public service. And part of the problem to date has been that some of these projects have been so dispersed around government that they've not been magnetic enough for people to feel that their individual contributions are actually going to make the kind of change or impact that they're able to do in the private sector at the moment. I hope, and I think there is already growing evidence for the creation of the digital centre, the elevation of the importance of this government and the British government of the need to transform public services and the way that the state operates, and the sheer potential to be part of something which is so transformational and impactful is itself showing that there is a place where you can have a highly satisfying vehicle for your talents as well. Bear in mind that some of the units that have now come into the digital centre have never had a senior ministerial oversight in the past. And you get a sense now that they're probably bored sick of me and the kind of oversight that they're getting directly at Secretary of State level for this. So I think there are lots of things that we can attract people.
And finally, I mean, you've already given us quite a lot of insight into the National Data Library, the challenge, its decade of reform to do it. You've already mentioned the challenges around cybersecurity and the review that's taking place. One of the other challenges relating to transformation of IT and creation of large data libraries is that there's increasing dominance of IT systems by a small number of companies. So how do you intend to ensure that the UK retains sovereign capability where that is really national interest, whilst benefiting from the scale of these systems and balancing the transformation ease of use with cybersecurity?
It's one of the questions of our time, and it's a question where already the answers to that question are slightly different today than they were 3.5 months ago when we came into office, and certainly quite different than would have been at the beginning of this year in some cases. In terms of the security of the big providers, if we're talking about AWS and Microsoft and Google, both the CIA and GCHQ domestically do commission some of those services themselves, which gives an idea of the level of security for which they are able to provide in singular terms. Secondly, the nature of sovereign capacity, we have to be very clear about what data it is we need to be domiciled here, what degree of data we need to make sure is onshore for resilience purposes, and also what role the state plays in maturing the sector itself to ensure that it's affordable and accessible for small and medium-sized enterprises and micro-enterprises, which could become the next Google DeepMinds and the like. So all of these things are in an active matrix which move. The big three players have an ability to invest in infrastructure which is astonishing and is something we want to attract in our country. We also want to make sure that the next tier providers, such as CoreWeave and Northern Data and a couple of others, find themselves in a market which is healthy, for which they can bid for and they can actually interact with the state. This is one of the things where there's been a culture change within DSIT. We are engaging very actively with all providers who want to have a relationship with government at the moment when it comes to data provision and the construction of data centres. I pay tribute to Emran and the way he's led through the cultural change of our department. The engagement programme we have with these companies is active. And then just to also mention at this point that we have also already embarked on a programme of planning reform. This was one of the key barriers we were told to investment in the country on digital infrastructure. And now the Deputy Prime Minister and ministers are able to intervene to expedite should planning or life science lab space get bogged down in local planning applications in a way which is deemed to be sort of anti-growth but also anti the interests of that community itself.
We're going to have to move on, I'm afraid.
Sorry,
could I ask people to keep both questions and answers short to try and ensure we get through the whole lot that we'd like to ask. So, Lord Borwick.
Good afternoon. Industrial strategy paper. The Green Paper lists very broad areas of focus. And the government says you're going to prioritise subsectors in the spring when the full strategy is set out. DSIT will feed into this, presumably.
That's quite correct, yes. There are 8 sectors we're honing in on. We will be delivering on 2 of those. And for digital and the digital and technology sector being one, we are feeding into those, and by spring there will be all the detail that you would expect.
Okay. So digital technology is one. What's the other one?
The other one is life sciences.
Life sciences.
Yes.
Right.
And do we know who the other 6 are going to be allocated to?
Yes, they are all announced.
They're all
published and being coordinated by the Department for Business and Trade. In our area, we're now working intensively with DBT on this. I also sit on the mission board for the Future of Work, which also is playing a role in this. And we're now consulting with our stakeholders, and we're doing the work you would expect as a department to make sure that the voice of the digital and tech sector and life sciences is heard loud and clear in it, because it is very clear that they are so central to the growth mission of this government and, of course, to the industrial future of our country.
Are there any parts that DSIT has been working on in the past which will not be carried through under the new system?
Well, as I say, we've come in with a new set of priorities. We've given headline priorities, which isn't a million miles away from some of the strategies of the past. The problem with the strategies of the past, as the committee well knows, is that we've gone from one period where, in the last 14 years, where we had a government that refused to say the words industrial strategy,
yes,
to suddenly going to a government which named a department after industrial strategy, and then 2 more iterations where we had, I think, 5 priorities and then 7 or 8 priorities. It's the sheer instability of it. Now, I accept that 3.5 months in, I'm not able to give all of the clarity on where that will be, because we've already pre-announced that'll come in the spring. But the key reason for getting this right is we want this to be a framework through which businesses who are already operating domestically, through our R&D who are providing the future innovation for our business community, but crucially those companies abroad that are looking globally for where to invest, will see a country which is stable and pointing to the long term, because as every single one of you around this table will have said so many times that it must make you crazy, that Germany does this. And Germany's great success when it comes to industry has been its long-term thinking, and the fact that they have large parts of their industrial strategy that withstand changes of government. And I think we need to get that kind of trajectory, which has such logic behind it, such success in delivering core missions for growth, which is accepted by both parties, that its success will speak for itself and last through multiple parliaments into the future.
Lord Berkeley.
Thank you, Chair. Just building on that theme, I mean, we've taken evidence about the problem of companies growing, scaling up, if you like, in the UK. And it doesn't seem to have worked in the past very well, but I think your government has talked about ambitions to use pension funds and procurement, and you've touched on that, but to support science and technology for longer term. How is it going to be different this time, and why did it fail in the past?
Well, one of the key challenges for scaling up has been the insecurity and instability in the economy generally. Look, I really can't tell you when I've been meeting stakeholders, I say the word stakeholders, but businesses and investors, venture capitalists who are looking at Britain, the instability when they looked at Britain in our politics and in the management of our economy was an incredible deterrent. It's very hard to quantify. So it was very hard to sort of point to it. People don't wake up in the morning when they're getting ready for work or studies and think about it in a way that they think about other challenges facing the country. But it was a terrible deterrent for investment into our economy. So the stability that has returned to our management of our economy, the long-term planning which we are embedding, has already unlocked investment into the economy. The investment summit that we had a couple of weeks ago had £63 billion worth of investment committed to the country. But the key thing, when you deep down into it, is that 24.3 billion, I think actually it was 24.3 billion, I think I'm right in saying, of that money was directly related to AI investment in our country. That in itself, just investment into AI infrastructure in our country, in that one summit, almost matched the total pledged investment from the previous investment summit just 18 months earlier. So you can see we're already managing to unlock investment. The next thing is about reform. Pension reform is something that the Chancellor has spoken about over the budget period. She spoke about it in opposition, and that work is well underway. I have been consulted on it directly. My department is involved in it because there is very clearly our economy is undercapitalised. We have a venture capital landscape which isn't capitalised enough to do the kind of broad investments that we've seen in the past, but we don't in singular terms have enough private investors that are able to do this full scale-up work, which is why the term valley of death has emerged, where people, we're very, very good at spinning out, we're good at doing the first signs of scale-up, but when you need to go back for rounds 2 and 3 of funding, and you're hitting sums above 70 or 80 million into the over £100 million of investment, it is extremely hard to find it, whereas you can find it in Silicon Valley, that kind of degree of funding, in a matter of weeks. And we want innovators to be rewarded in this country, and we want these kind of intellectual property to be remaining in this country, and we want the jobs that are created from it being taken by people who are currently in school or university or further education and apprenticeships. That they are the people we really have to bear in mind when we strive to deliver the reforms that people need, that we need on this.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, there's good news there, but can you just explain why the National Wealth Fund appears to have been effectively had its funding cut by a fifth in the budget? That's the advice I've had.
No, the National Wealth Fund, I believe, is now capitalised to the degree of 27 billion when you now include the private sector aspects of it. We've incorporated a number of other sort of financial institutions that are out there, so we can give that are already in existence, so that we can give clarity of vision, a very strategic approach. But we're already quite confident that for every pound that the National Wealth Fund invests, we'll be able to unlock at least £3 more in private investment, and those are the kind of partnerships that we're fighting for at the moment. But at the moment, we've certainly exceeded, in my view, the ambitions that we'd already set out for the first year of government with it.
So the wording held in reserve maybe is why the difference between our views on this, so that the held in reserve is meaningless, is it?
I would say it's there working for our country.
Before I let you get back to your comfort zone of digital and AI, I have to follow up on the answer you gave at the beginning of this question, which was when we were talking about the industrial strategy, you immediately said, yes, that the digital and technology and the life sciences were sort of owned by DCIT. And some of us from the engineering and physical sciences side would be very concerned that you didn't also want to stake claim to advanced manufacturing and clean energy, which we feel should also be absolutely core to what DCIT is supporting.
It is, and I hope that you'll see that the manufacturing innovation fund that we've extended for another year already in the budget, and then also some of the other key investments into quantum. Into quantum funding, which is £100 million. I was up there in Glasgow over the summer announcing that investment, into those key industries of the sector of the future, those key advanced manufacturing sectors. We're striving at the bit.
Sadly, the nuclear AMRC in Sheffield has closed because the university can't make it a financial success.
Alex,
do you want me to? So, on the 8 sectors, DCIT's leading on life sciences, jointly with DHSE and digital and technologies, but absolutely supporting the others. And indeed, we're working incredibly closely with the space sector on the advanced manufacturing. Our R&D system funds a number of things that underpins that system, from Faraday to the catapults.
Assure us there's going to be no lack of focus on all of those other key areas that DCIT and UKRI fund.
I think the other strand we've got in the industrial strategy is actually we're looking at how science and tech can help every single one of these areas, because we know that we need to grow science and tech sectors, so the specific sectors, and then science and tech helps every single sector. So we're looking at it from both dimensions. That's one of the things we're looking at with all of the people leading on putting together the sector plan. So absolutely, and of course DCIT's responsible for the R&D system, and that means we fund a lot of the underpinning capability from discovery research through to some of those institutions, which means we're always working with our colleagues right across government on this, and we're having some very good conversations about what they're funding, what we're funding, and how that works to support industrial strategy and the growth mission as well. Very much support with the ministers keeping an eye on us through all the various growth boards that the Secretary of State sits on.
You can see from the way that we're answering, the DCIT is becoming a sort of supportive role across government. And you see some of the other things that come out of the budget. So the R&D missions fund, for example, a £25 million fund, which we hope will just be the start going forward. And that is how we can now use the power of R&D, the power of the areas that we're covered in DCIT, in order to tackle some of the singular challenges that individual departments in the past have failed to make enough progress on. So by having this missions fund, we're able to go to those missions leads across government and say, what are your singular challenges that you think are holding back delivery for the country in your areas, and we will see whether we can allocate some funding from DCIT, but then use our networks to start harnessing the power across R&D, innovation, higher education, and also those private sector stakeholders we have very good relationships with, to see whether we can give a new singular push to some of the real challenges, those knotty challenges that have been holding us back. But that's a good illustration of how I am trying to position DCIT to be there to support other government departments, even when we're not necessarily in the leadership role itself.
Not a very large sum of money, but I need to move on to Lord Way. Lord Way.
Yes, we understand the AI Opportunities Action Plan will make recommendations about AI infrastructure. The government cancelled £1.3 billion of underfunded technology and AI projects, including a flagship supercomputer in Edinburgh. Leaving aside the politics of whether they were funded, is there any plan to replace them?
As soon as you raise it, I can't leave aside. It's not politics to say that it was unfunded. People have challenged me on this from the media, from opposition, and elsewhere on this issue, but nobody has been able to point to me a single piece of paper with DCIT written on the top, which confirms any of the funding in the first place. I didn't come in and cut this programme, particularly the Exascale one that you're referring to there, because I didn't like the programme. In fact, I didn't cut anything because the programme didn't exist in the first place, and this is an intense frustration for me, because I had 3 choices to make on that £1.3 billion, all of which was unfunded, uncosted, without any allocated resource from Treasury at all. I had to make 3 choices. Did I cut 1.3 billion, or in one case £800 million from other parts of my budget? Did I just carry on with the smoke and mirrors that have gone before, because it was possible for me to carry on talking about this project without ever having to admit that the money didn't exist into the future? Or did I just try and go back to the Treasury and say, or go back and try and find more money for it? Because the money just simply wasn't there. So I find myself in the position of apologising to people who believed that there was money allocated to their projects and there wasn't. But it wasn't my position to apologise, because it wasn't my government that made these decisions and acted in this way. In terms of where we move forward, I must make one very, very clear promise to every one of the sectors out there that relies on this infrastructure, and that is that I am in the process of fully understanding the needs and the capabilities of our country if we get digital infrastructure and compute right. And that will be the needs and capabilities as they are today in 2024, not 3 years ago when many of these promises were made. And when I come up with my conclusions, they will be fully costed, fully funded, and the Treasury will be on board in order to deliver them.
And the Financial Times reported the plan will ask for reduced costs for visas for people with AI expertise. And as a committee, we've written several times to the previous government about the issue of visa costs for science and tech talent. Will you be making a case to Home Office that we should compete for top talent and provide more visas for scientists?
Britain is the best place in the world to innovate, to put those high skills to use. And actually, I think it was about 8,000 visas for the high-skilled programme that came in last year. That was an increase of 16%. So I don't think the idea that we are at the moment putting people off coming here is correct. But I will continue to beat the drum, because that's what you asked me to do, for Britain being the best destination. I think we already are a great place for people to come from around the world, and we're a welcoming place for people to come with their skills and put those skills to use, tackling not just Britain's problems, because when Britain solves some of these big challenging issues, we solve them for the global good as well.
We certainly hear from universities and small companies that this is putting people off from coming. Absolutely.
Look, I'm not here to defend the previous government. We have a set of inheritances.
Why are you going to do something about it?
Well, I think you've already seen this week, and last week with the Chancellor, that we are actually taking the difficult decisions to reset relationships with stakeholders, both globally and domestically, and then also to create the conditions from which we can start to rebuild. What we saw last week is we can't solve all these problems in one step. And what I've discovered in this job, if I'm speaking very bluntly, is that when I speak to people who are running universities, I'm speaking to people who are running construction firms, when they describe the challenges they have in their sector and in their businesses or organisations, it sounds an awful lot similar to the challenges I inherited when I came into this job. Regulation and planning systems that weren't fit for purpose, underfunded, undercapitalised projects, and just sheer instability. And the lack of strategic thinking, which is impacting them in the same way it's impacting me. So we have a shared inheritance when it comes to the challenges that I face with many of the stakeholders that we have. Now, I know that there is a lot more to do when it comes to rebuilding the financial and in all terms, sustainability of many sectors, including higher education, for example. But you can see that we're taking the very, very difficult first steps to do so. When it comes to talent, that is obviously an issue for the Home Office to take. But I do think already that we are a great place to come to study, to teach, and to do your research.
Thank you. Lord Wade, did you want to finish your question? Sorry.
No, I think I'll leave it at that.
We'll move on then to Viscount Stansgate. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to your first session with the Select Committee. Now, I wanted to ask a bit about using AI in government. There's obviously a clear commitment to try to do so, but we have seen what can happen when too much trust is put in unaccountable algorithms. And it could be that some sort of high-profile scandal involving AI could derail a huge agenda in this area. So what regulations or safeguards are being put in place, or are you thinking about? before AI is used extensively in government, and how are you planning to evaluate the usefulness and accuracy of the models that are under discussion? What's your thinking in this area?
Thanks, because it's incredibly important. I accept that the future success of our country, if we are to meet our potential as a country, rests on being able to fully capitalise, implement and harness the power of AI. And that doesn't mean us all collectively as a country. It means individual people who are running businesses, running organisations, large and small, are going to have to try and embrace it. But I can't expect people to do so unless they believe the technology they are using is safe. And I accept that we cannot expect people to start using, allowing government to start using data in ways that are modern and are technologically innovative for their benefit unless they believe that their data is being used in ways that is safe and respects their privacy. I accept this because in opposition, and when we were preparing for government, I spent a lot of time speaking to some of my predecessors to ask about the challenges they had. And when you particularly speak to people like Lord Sainsbury, during the GM modified crop challenges that he faced then, by government getting that argument wrong at the time, set back our ability to develop a scientific excellence which to this day is still prohibited or inhibited in our abilities to exploit it. I want to learn from those experiences, so I feel very strongly. The second aspect of it on the macro is that we've come into government at a time when safety is an issue right across the board. Women and girls don't feel safe going outside after dark in the streets, physically. Parents don't think their children are safe online. This is not the environment in which we can fully out there and explore our potential as individuals. So we have a big issue on safety overall. I want to reassure people, and I can talk through an example that went live today, which is the gov.uk chat, which is an AI facility which has been trained on government interactions, so that people can now go with piloting it with 15,000 businesses having access to it in beta form today, and those businesses can now go to gov.uk and interact with an AI-powered chat system, which will then interact with them, answer questions about any area of government business or any area of government activity. And they can ask, for example, how to set a business up, very specifically, geographically, locally, or whether it's about the structures of setting a business up, and then have a conversation that will unflow underneath it. And in a matter of minutes, they will get answers, very specific answers and signposts to questions about how to do things and get things done with business that previously would have taken hours to find the answer to online, and in some cases would have taken days when you take into account the follow-up. Now, in order to do so and create this tool, we have respected all of the existing privacy legislation that is out there. So when people interact with this new chat facility, they will not be able to interact and input any personal data. So if they say things like, "Can you email that to me?" it will say no, because it will not allow you to input private data. And all of the respective pieces of data that you are accessing are still retained by the individual units and departments across government. They're not pooled together in one receptacle place. They're still retained in individual places with all of the GDPR protections fully in place, and the central system has no access and ability to share it across. Now, these are things which we are delivering sensitively, and we are governing in as detailed way as we can, whilst fully unleashing the power of this technology to solve the challenges that people tell us they have when they're interacting with government.
Can I just come in there? 'Cause it's not just about privacy, is it? It's also about bias. And that's where some of the scandals that we have had have been about. A company that's never appointed a woman or a black person, so the algorithm assumes that these people aren't suitable and only put forward white candidates. Yeah. That's as crucial, if we're using algorithms, as the issue you've talked a lot about, which is the issue of the safety of people's data.
You are totally correct. And that is, all of these issues are things that we are working on now. So this has been in development for a while. We are very well equipped because we have facilities within DCIT that have and access to a lot of resources, such as the AI Safety Institute and some of the talent that exists within DCIT, who can help us design these systems as safely as possible, but also bearing in mind some of the challenges that are posed by use of large language models and AI. But then let me also just put this in other terms and talk through the voice of a Secretary of State rather than somebody who's using this in the private sector. There is a real cautiousness in government when using technology like this for very understandable reasons. The beta went live today, and it would have been very tempting for government just to not talk about it and me not talk about it because it's in beta phase. We've now got to the phase where we've tested for biases, we've tested for other safety issues, but I know full well that there are going to be some perversities that sneak out there. Now we have thousands and thousands of people testing it, not small teams of people testing it within the government itself. I am going to embrace this period of beta testing. When things come out there which might be embarrassing, might well cause the columnists and the sketch writers to poke fun at me or my department, I'm going to take this on the chin because this is the nature of development, and we have to, if we are going to use technology as a department and as a government, we have to accept some of the same developmental challenges that are faced by other sectors, and we can't actually run away from those sorts of things. But we've done everything we can. And just finally to say that the data that was used to train this model was all within the government sphere to start with. We haven't trained it on the general language outside of government. This is a tool to help people interact with government, and therefore it's been trained only on the data that we hold within government itself.
Sorry, if I can't Stansgate you.
Well, I was just going to ask you one follow-up about how you're monitoring it, because you say that it'll be possible to engage in this chat, but at the same time it's not centrally held and you'll be able to presumably then interrogate departments directly, other departments. But how are you intending? Are you intending to produce an assessment of some kind about how this is working?
Yes, of course. So the data that's been accessed is dispersed, but we'll clearly, Gov.uk is a very well-resourced body, and we are going to be monitoring the interactions with that data very closely to make sure that any issues which do emerge are put into action. This has to be a constantly evolving product in order to keep up. Emran, you're very welcome to add if you'd like, but these are the facilities to monitor those interactions, what leads to any outcomes, and certainly in the beta stage in particular, we're going to be looking very, very closely at individual interactions to make sure that we can see that the correct response has been delivered in a way that's satisfying for the person using it.
Okay. Yeah, I think just to add that we have very explicitly launched it as a beta with a limited user group because we know it requires further testing. And so we're looking for those users to give us feedback on, is it proving useful? Is it giving them the information that they most wanted? Where is it making mistakes? Because at this stage it will make mistakes. And we need to learn what those mistakes are to make the tool better and better. And that's why it's not gone to a sort of a launch where absolutely anybody can access it. We're doing it in beta form.
If all goes well, at what stage would you hope to roll it out?
We're looking we're not looking at a time period. We're looking for a number of interactions. So as soon as we hit a certain number of interactions, we will then have confidence that we've ironed out some of the issues that we might be exploring. But I hope the committee recognises that. For a Secretary of State to come here saying, I've just released a service to the public, which I know is going to make mistakes, is in itself an innovation. Yep. I recognise now, from having observed how innovation works in other sectors, that government has got to get used to this kind of thing, and we have to help the public understand what it is that we're trying to achieve here. Because if we don't find mistakes, in the next whatever period it is, with thousands and thousands of interactions that we're going to have with this chat facility, then it's not doing its job properly. This is part of the process, and we can't just keep everything behind closed doors in secret in policy development terms, which is what government normally does. with this kind of technology. We need volume testing of it because we are looking at a volume sort of support for the general population.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Anna Young, please.
Good afternoon, Minister. I really want to follow up on something that the Chair said about public concern. And I think the issue is about public concern where decisions that are affecting their lives are being made by a process that involves algorithms and AI. And I really just wondered, should there be a rule that whenever a public body is using that sort of decision-making system, that they need to publish the fact that that is the case? And I know that there's something called ATRS, the Algorithmic Transparency Recording Standard, which I think was probably aimed at getting that sort of disclosure, but has been very little used so far. I just wonder, how can we reassure the public through some clear mechanisms that there isn't a computer with an algorithm and AI behind decision-making that they don't know about and they don't trust?
Yeah, thank you. It's a really important area to interrogate. There is a standard, the algorithmic transparency. Forgive this is where my brain was. Forgive me.
Recording standard. Yes.
Recording standard. The algorithmic transparency recording standard, and organisations are advised as best practice to annually release a statement of how algorithms use consumers' data and then make that public. Now, government signed up to this standard some time ago, but I believe last year only one, certainly less than 3 government departments released that statement. I have recommitted this government to start releasing those statements. It will take time to get to the point where every department is able to release those statements. But just to be very clear, this would become an annual statement where the algorithm, the nature of algorithms that are using their data are described to the public so that they can understand how algorithms are used by each individual government department. And as I say, it was a source of intense frustration for me in opposition that so few government departments were adhering to this standard, because very hard for me as a Secretary of State to go out there and implore private sector providers and other providers of services not to start adhering to this standard and telling their customers and service users how they're using their data with using algorithms if government itself isn't doing it. And that was the case before. It certainly won't be the case going forward with this government.
And are you convinced that this standard goes far enough? Does it actually involve the use of generative AI and large language models, and isn't just a way of listing decision processes that have got some sort of algorithmic or AI support embedded in them?
No, this standard,
the quality of that work into the standard as well as just the quantity.
I believe that the standard set by these annual statements is of a high enough standard that it would satisfy the vast majority of people who want to understand how algorithms are used to interact with their data at the moment. But we are living in a world where technology moves on fast. And if the nature of that technology changes and therefore the standards need to adapt, I won't be sitting on my hands in order to do so. As I said before, we can only explore our potential as a country and innately as individuals out there in the economy if we believe this technology is being used safely. We can only use this technology as a government if citizens and service users believe that government is treating their data with safety and their privacy is taken into account. And a big part of that and earning that trust is going to be transparency. I really don't see any circumstances where we would see a reason not to be transparent as a government with how we're using algorithms in order to deliver services to our citizens.
So can I just get clarity? There will be an instruction to all government departments to report on their use of this standard.
Indeed, there is that instruction has existed for some time. It's just not been applied or adhered to. This government expects government departments to adhere to that standard.
One of the points that the chief scientific advisor talked to us about was whether there might be a case for having a watchdog for the use of AI in government. I mean, obviously, it's such a crucial issue because there'll only be one opportunity to have some catastrophic misuse of data, as happened with the NHS data, which sets the public off in the wrong direction. Do you think it'd be a good idea to have an in-house watchdog to make, or preferably an independent in-house watchdog, to make sure that all government departments are being transparent and quality orientated in terms of their use of algorithms and AI?
The reasons that I've already outlined, I'm very keen that use of AI and digital technology in government is governed as effectively and efficiently as possible. And I'm quite open-minded to discussions and debates as to how we achieve that going forward, because I just think it's so elemental to our success. The thing I would just say, though, as how my thinking would be informed, is that we have to understand that AI is a general purpose technology, and therefore its use is very profound and very, very diffuse. So right now, my department is leading a trial, for example, of Microsoft Copilot in 20,000 civil servants across government. At the moment, we've got to 18,000, but I think within a fortnight we'll get that up to 20,000. So we're trying to understand how AI can be used to assist civil servants in their administrative duties on behalf of their departments and our government. That's a trial that we're looking at very closely. In the NHS, it is already being used in Huddersfield Hospital, as I spoke about earlier, where to assist in radiography and to detect early sign patterns, which at the moment the human eye is very, very challenged to detect, which is incredibly efficient at diagnosing early stage lung cancer. I could go on and on and on, because in education it's helping teachers to design, but I won't. Don't
much time left.
So when you say to have a sort of a regulator or a sort of a governance unit inside government, just think of the burden that it would have to take in order to capture all of what AI is doing across government.
Yeah, I don't think I'm seeing it as a gatekeeper. I think I'm seeing it as a standard setter, really. One last question, Minister. I mean, you talked about AI helping civil servants, but I gather that the government was due to trial something that would help ministers with their red boxes. Is that happening, and have you used it, and was it useful?
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't catch the end of the question there.
Was it useful?
Was what useful? Sorry.
The red. We gather that there was to be something offered to ministers to help them with an AI-based process that was to help them with their red boxes.
Oh, okay.
I wonder whether you've had personal experience of it and whether it works.
So that was a predecessor government. I'm not sure if that was an announcement that went the whole way or not. I'm not sure.
If that's a no, can we move on to the next question?
Sure.
Because I'm just really worried about time. So if we could move on to Lord Strasburger.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and I apologise again for my temporary absence while you were dispensing your pearls of wisdom. We've been talking about the risks of AI. We've been talking about the risks of using AI. I'd like to talk about the risks of AI itself and about regulation both here and internationally. Now, the Labour government manifesto said that binding regulation would be introduced on big tech companies who are developing the frontier AI models. What are your priorities for this regulation? And will it diverge significantly from the EU's regulation? Is there a risk that the US tech giants developing frontier AI effectively lump us in with the EU regulatory approach?
The manifesto commitment was to put on a statutory footing the voluntary code that has already been signed up by all of the frontier AI labs based in America, and DeepMind, which is obviously owned by Google here in the UK. And that voluntary code, I think when we look at the power of technology, I think most people, when they look at that power, would expect it not to be a voluntary code, but backed up by statutory conditions. So I'll be introducing legislation that will just do two things. It will put the voluntary code onto a statutory footing, so there will be a compulsion for early release, pre-release release of the models for testing by the relevant Safety Institute. And then secondly, it will be creating the Safety Institute into an arm's length body to give it a bit of independence and a long-term future, because safety is so important.
It's very easy to see the benefits of AI, at least it is now. The downsides are less obvious, and there are a number of eminent people in AI, including Geoffrey Hinton, who's thought by many to be the godfather of AI, and had started work on it in 1985. It came and spoke in this house, actually, about the risks of AI itself and the human race losing control of AI. And this is a serious man with serious concerns. How seriously do you take this? And is it the intention that the AI Safety Institute or other international organisations would really have teeth to step in if they see something on their models that was deemed unsafe in this respect?
Firstly, can I congratulate Geoffrey Hinton and Dennis Hassabis on their Nobel Prizes. It's a real credit to us as a country. Geoffrey, of course, lives in Canada now, but I like to think all of his scientific prowess was developed when he lived in Britain.
It was.
I think in terms the potential dangers of AI into the future, when you take into account the general nature of it, but also the exponential growth in its capacity and power, have to be taken very, very seriously. I just simply say that there is nothing inevitable about the way that AI either unfolds, develops, or impacts our society and economy. As a government, we do have agency in this. And the fact that I'm so swiftly putting the Safety Institute onto a statutory footing, I believe that it has been a real success, for which I am grateful to the previous administration and to Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister at the time, because it was a wise thing to do, which has had impact around the world. But I simply say that in terms of regulation and then also planning for the possible impact, I've already instructed all of our regulators to do an assessment into the sectors that they regulate about the impact that AI will have, which is a different approach to the EU, I accept. The Safety Institute is being invested in, but the final piece is that we are not going to be able to solve the challenges that are posed by AI or seize the opportunities unless we work collaboratively, constructively with our like-minded countries and try as much as possible to engage with China. We have to set global standards. We have to work internationally as well as domestically. And if we do so, I believe we can harness this power rather than being negatively impacted as a predominant feature of it.
You're confident that the human race...
We're going to have to move on to the last question, by the way. I'm really sorry. So, Baroness Willis.
So, changing topics quite rapidly here, on to the university funding crisis. So we had the previous Secretary of State in here in March, and she told us quite categorically there was no funding crisis in universities. I've declared an interest. I've worked in universities, the university sector, for the last 40 years. I would disagree with that. And we've had a number of university vice-chancellors in here who have said the same, that there is a funding crisis. Now there are reports in the Times saying that DSIT officials have been drawing up contingency plans to safeguard researchers in the event of universities going insolvent. Are there such assessments going on, and what's the government's view on this? DSIT's view on it, really.
My predecessor was wrong to say what she said back then. I think we all knew that financial stresses were being experienced by higher education. But those stresses weren't just R&D budgets, they weren't just the fact that tuition fees have been held down, they were coming from multiple directions at once. And I'm afraid to the shame of our country, our university courses were being talked down by the Prime Minister downwards, which is why I said during the election period that the war on universities would end the day one of a Labour government, and that war has ended on day one of a Labour government. Does that mean that we can fix all of the challenges all at once? No, it doesn't. I know that there is financial challenges faced. It's not evenly distributed across higher education, but it is felt in different places in different ways, and that therefore the way to get the sector up on its feet again and facing the future with confidence will be different in different places. You'll see that just yesterday the Education Secretary made an announcement about tuition fees. You'll also see that my R&D budget has been faced an uplift of 6.5%. This shows confidence that will impact broadly the higher education sector. I don't just want to plug the gaps that have been left by my predecessors. The opportunities and the needs of higher education and the societal needs of higher education have evolved. And I want to make sure that universities are benefiting from all of the best that's out there at the moment. And when DSIT is investing in many different parts of communities up and down the country, I want those bits of communities and areas to be working very collaboratively together. And that's what we're going to be working with universities going forward. The relationship we have is granular in higher education. It is detailed. And I know that UKRI is doing its absolute best to get the sector supported.
And I appreciate all of that. Just coming back to that question, I mean, is there a plan? Has DSIT been working on a plan of what happens when or if some universities go insolvent?
We are, as a department, working really hard to ensure that the sector has a really bright future. We know that some universities are experiencing challenges that are singular. And in those circumstances, we're doing absolutely everything we can. This is led primarily by the Education Department. It is led primarily by the Education Secretary. We are working very closely together. My department is working very closely, often under the leadership of the Education Department, but we're using the resources that we have to make sure that there is a good net beneath the university sector, but crucially, that in rebuilding, we rebuild the sector in a way and support the rebuilding of the sector in the way that just captures all of the potential that's out there for the future economy and the needs that the country has when it comes to skills.
So if I could just sort of slightly build on that, and I'm going to be quick, I know I'm sort of on borrowed time, but of course you've got the research budget and that can come through UKRI, that's fantastic, but there are so many universities that we've heard from who are brilliant at the apprenticeship schemes. They're not the research active ones. So how does that come within the sort of DSIT framing of how to sort of think about going forward to building that sort of capacity of scientists and the people who are actually going to be the technicians and then the other scales within research support infrastructure in the UK?
It's quite widely known that I had difficulty through education and had to apply. I was rejected 4 times to get into university. Once I got in, everything unlocked.
Yeah.
I understand the power that university has, but I understand that's not for me an experience I know is limited to universities. You know, apprenticeships unlock similar potential in other people and have led to astonishing careers for them and will do into the future. We're looking at all pathways through education into the workplace, and you know that we've already reviewed and updated and modernised the apprenticeship levy to make it fit for the moment we're living in. We're also doing as much as we can to ensure that those different pathways, you know, are producing the skills that are needed and are very sensitive locally where there are local skills demands and challenges. And
I mean, my point, we had Manchester Metropolitan University here who absolutely thrive and do a fantastic job on that, but they would not be, I think, say they were, you know, front and centre for the research funding, and those I think are in some ways the most vulnerable universities. So that was just behind. If I could just ask one more, which is about international students. Now, and I know that myself, my own experience, that's where the real problem has absolutely hit, that the numbers have just gone off over the cliff. And so what do you think, where does DSIT or can DSIT help in that aspect of it?
Again, these are issues that are led by the Home Office, and all I would say is that Britain is the best place to study. You know, we have some of the top universities in the world for research. We have some of the top universities for teaching in the world. and that I think that the negative sentiment that was sent out previously about studying here, and I'm talking about things like Mickey Mouse courses that should never ever have been uttered and said, play a role in some of that decline, as well as some of the other issues that you talk about. We need to be a magnetic, compelling place to come and study based on the facts, which are what a great experience people have when they come here to learn, because we are a great place to learn as well as to come and teach and do research. As we move forward, I just hope that the committee knows that we can't do everything in 3.5 months. And the rebuilding of the sector will be different to just simply replacing the bits that were lopped off before or were challenged before. And I'm just trying to find ways of helping universities, and all pathways that young people take into the economy are fit for the future. And if I could just say, if you'll allow me, that's my principle in this job, is to look at the potential our country has, not to try and guess what government can do. And it's that bit that at the moment government hasn't shown the capacity to do, but there is more potential out there our country has. Well, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning and keeps me so excited about doing this job, and is so thrilled to be the Secretary of State that's here before you today.
I want to bring in Lord Rees before you escape from us, who has been waiting patiently, so don't make any closing statements yet. Lord Rees.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up the Minister's last statements, which I would fully endorse, we clearly want to make science an attractive career for foreign talent and for young people choosing careers, and to provide an environment for research which offers the right conditions of intellectual stimulus, etc. I wonder if you feel if we have the right mix between university research and standalone institutes. We know our medical success has been achieved through a mixture of standalone institutes and universities. I wonder if you feel we've got the balance right in other important areas like agriculture, transport, and energy. Or do we need more standalone institutes, for instance?
My Lord, I'm afraid I'm not going to answer the question directly, because I don't think it's my job as Secretary of State to decide all of the different places where research could, should, or will flourish. And what sectors it is. I see it as my job as, my doctorate is in social sciences, which I get asked about all the time now I'm in this job, because people think I might be a scientist. And therefore, I think my job is to create the framework of the circumstances and enough flexibility in our system that the might of the British government can follow the talent and follow where the innovation is flourishing and emerging from. And if we get that, then we will be able to fully exploit the talent that we have out there and the innovation we have that's being sparked right now as we speak, if we get this right. And that's what I'm hoping we can create a government that can do.
One remark just to underline my question was the realization that it's widely thought that university careers are less attractive to researchers than they used to be, with more bureaucracy, less time for long-term projects, etc. And so it was really that motivation which led me to ask whether you think the balance ought to be shifted towards some standalone institutes.
I think it's a great insight that you've shared, because I've now spent quite a bit of time with some of these companies that have gone from nothing to tens of billions of value in a heartbeat. What I notice in some of these very, very fleet of foot but very disruptive and powerful tech companies is the way that when an individual comes forward with talent and an innovation that has potential, the entire organisation bends towards that talent and the individual that's creating it in a way that's quite breathtaking. And sometimes we're talking at people who are in their early 20s and with great youth, but also a great idea and great potential. But you compare that to the standard model in universities, where you're not really given power and influence until you've published a certain amount of papers and you've reached a few sort of hierarchical thresholds. And I don't think that it matches the exploitation of potential and innovation to the same way that we've seen in some of the companies both here in the UK and, of course, in Silicon Valley.
No, that's music to our ears, Minister.
I just quickly come back to the point that Baroness Willis was making, which is to do great science, we need great scientists and indeed great technicians to support them. And really just to say, what advocacy are you doing with the Department for Education and Skills England to make sure their priorities are going to deliver those scientists and those people who will support them? Because, and I need to declare an interest as a former chair of STEM Learning Limited, but we hear that Department for Education are, for example, cutting budgets for science teachers CPD and indeed for the National Centre for Computing Education. And, you know, if it doesn't start in our schools, then it isn't going to work in our universities and our scientific research.
You can see already that we've undertaken a comprehensive review of the national curriculum. We have established Skills England. These are all bodies which are now, and reviews and programmes of work which are well underway and are aligning towards the 5 missions of our government, but also the priorities that we set out in our industrial strategy. We have to understand the granular nature of what skills are needed and where they are needed in order to develop a system that's fit for purpose for delivering it. And I understand that there is a lot of information out there already, there's a lot of experience out there already, but we are a new government and we are trying to set the platform for a decade of national renewal and hopefully into the future beyond that as well. So these are areas that we are right now trying to understand. If you ask whether I'm advocating for it, I hope already you've seen from my evidence today the outcome of the first spending review, that we are a department and I'm a Secretary of State that understands fully the power of science, of STEM, of knowledge, of scientific discovery, and the value that modern critical technologies and the emerging technologies have for not just our society, not just tackling challenges, but creating really profound opportunities for people, our country, and our economy as well.
Well, we're delighted that you have that passion. We're absolutely desperate for you to be injecting that passion into all of the other secretaries of state across government so that we get the scientific basis that we need in this country to be a science superpower, which is we may not like the slogan, but we like the intent. So thank you very much, and we very much appreciate your time and the work of your colleagues who've come with you. Sorry we didn't get a chance to hear a bit more from them. But at that point, I'd like to thank very much the Secretary of State and formally end this session of the committee. Thank you.